All right, guys. How are you today? Hopefully you're not missing me too much. You should have picked up your populations and communities note sheet, and you should be sitting quietly. Mr. Hall should have the video playing, and you should be ready to just learn all that you can. Today we're going to talk about populations and communities. Yesterday we talked about ecology and kind of the basics and how ecosystems are affected and how they're built and what kind of little particles are put together to create a whole ecosystem. Today we're going to go up a step and start talking about populations and some of the changes that will occur inside a population and how that plays into communities themselves. All right, so first of all, we're going to have a little Dora moment here. Dora stares at the screen and waits for you to answer. So somebody tell me what a population is. You can kind of talk amongst yourselves or say it out loud. Hopefully you said something about all of one species being in the same place at the same time and willing to reproduce. We talked about that yesterday, so that's good if you remembered. Now, what are some things that you can think of that will contribute to the size of a population? Go for it. Yell it out. All right. Hopefully you said things like the amount of resources, whether that be food or shelter or just living space, maybe the amount of a predator that's present, maybe no predator at all. They could just have no-ending reproduction. Those are all things, good things that would contribute to limiting or advancing the size of a population. Now, populations are going to depend on each other for certain things. The first thing being food. You're going to have food to be able to live. You're also going to have shelter. So this may be that you live in a tree, you may live underground, you may live in a house like this, but you've got to have shelter of some kind, a place that you call home. You also need reproduction. If you don't have a mate, then you can't pass on your genetics, and that's kind of the whole reason we're animals here. So you got to have it. And then finally, you've got to have protection. So that may be bodily protection. Maybe it's muscles or teeth or claws or something. Maybe you're lower on the totem pole, and maybe it's camouflage or speed that you can get away from people, and that's your means of protection. So what happens when something like this changes? When you either lose your shelter or you've run out of food, what kind of responses do you think you're going to get from animals in the wild? Okay, hopefully you said that somebody is going to start tearing people up. If we have predation in the wild and we overeat or we undereat, we're going to have some changes within a population. What if a predator was introduced and there was no organism that ate that predator, and it was just the top dog, and it just got to eat and eat and eat, and it didn't matter? Well, eventually that would affect the lower parts of our food chain, because we'd run out of food for that predator. Is he going to just stop eating? No, he's going to find something else to eat. Now, this did happen in our world on an island called Guam. There were some shipments that were received at Guam that had snakes hidden. Not by anyone being mean, that's a pretty mean joke, but it just happened to be in the shipment. They didn't know that the snakes had snuck on the plane over there. It might have been a boat. But the snakes were released on the island. There were no natural predators to those snakes on the island, and so the snakes ate pretty much every bird on the island. And you can imagine a place without birds would be kind of odd. Birds are something that we take for granted, hearing them all the time, but an island without them would be very, very strange. The next thing you may consider is that we're going to have some competition. If we're running out of shelter, you're going to have some animals that are going to start fighting to try and get what they need. We talked yesterday about the different things that would happen if competition were to arise. Does anyone remember the three? All right, hopefully the first one, the easiest one, would be that somebody's going to move. Somebody's going to decide that this tree isn't worth it. I'm going to go find a new tree. The second thing, a little more drastic, is that maybe I'm not going to live in a tree anymore, and I will adapt, and I will go find another place to live, maybe underground, or maybe I'll build a nest in a fallen log or something like that. And finally, the most drastic, you guys remember this one? Right, you can die. So there will be a battle royale and a fight to the death, and someone's going to end up a winner and someone's going to end up a loser. So again, when competition arises, you can die, you can change, or you can move. Those are all of your options. There's not a fourth. All right, and then something other than competition, you may just get crowding and stress. This will obviously lead to competition, but as population sizes increase, we start to see certain symptoms develop in populations. The first one being aggression. You're going to see some animals that snap at each other. You may see animals that leave their young when they normally would have high parental care. You're going to see animals that just ditch them because they're like, hey, I got to worry about me right now. I can have another baby. I can't have another me. So they will oftentimes just buck their responsibilities. You'll see decreased fertility. This is present in human populations. Lots of times when women have trouble getting pregnant, the first thing they ask them is what kind of stresses are in their life. And if your body is under such a tension, not attention, but such a tension that everything in your body is working so hard to keep you alive, then it's not going to worry about trying to keep something else alive. So you won't ovulate, you won't drop an egg that month, you won't have any of those possibilities of getting pregnant because your body's like, hey, we can barely keep ourselves going here. We don't need to worry about making another human being. And finally, decreased resistance to disease. That's definitely present in the human population as well as all other animal populations. When we get stressed out and when we get a little pushed, we oftentimes will get sick because your immune system kind of goes down when you're under stress. So we can see that a lot. Now, how do you determine a population size? Well, first of all, you've got to consider where you started, where you ended, and then how much you've grown in between. So how much this population has changed over time. Now, you can't just consider the birth rate and the death rate. Obviously, the birth rate is going to be the number of births during that time. We're going to add to our number here. And death rates or mortality rate, as we've heard it referred to, is all those people that have died during a certain amount of time, which is going to take away. We can't necessarily just consider those two things. There's a couple other things that need to be included, but we'll get to those. So if we were to look at our equation right now, you would have your births here, minus your deaths, which would end up being your growth rate. That's your final number. So skip down to the next line where it says final number equals. Okay, now there's two different options that can occur here. You can see them in gray. One is positive and one is negative. If your growth rate turns out to be positive, that means your population is going to be growing or getting larger. If your growth rate ends up being negative, that means your population is shrinking or getting smaller. You're getting less individuals in that population. Now, there's a couple other things that contribute to this. We can hop down here to where it says immigration and emigration. Immigration is people coming in, I for in. Individuals moving into a population are going to add to that number. And then emigration, E for exit, these are individuals leaving, so we would subtract from that number as well. Now, in the United States, we also consider something called life expectancy. So if you're doing this for less than 70 years, you're going to have some overlap of people that could be passing away very, very quickly. So life expectancy is how long, on average, an individual is expected to live. Now, notice that word on average. That doesn't mean that on your 72nd birthday, gentlemen, that you're going to keel over. And ladies, you get to live a little bit longer, but doesn't mean that nobody gets to see 80. Some people are going to die at 50. Some people are going to live to 100. So you're going to get some overlap on either side here, but this is an average. You're going to get kind of close to this. For some reason, men live shorter lives than women. I think it's just because they don't take as good a care of themselves. Women are pretty good at being the bosses and making sure we stay alive and eat our vegetables and things like that. Now, what can affect a population size? Well, first you've got to consider population density, how many people are living in a specific area. This is not in your notes. This is just kind of a side note, a little vocab word there for you. Now, this one down here is in your notes. If you'll jump down to the bottom, it looks kind of like a trash can titled Limiting Factors. A limiting factor is going to be any living or non-living factor that restrains. That word restrains means slows down the growth of a population. Sometimes they'll actually advance the growth of a population, but not as often as they slow it down. There are two different types here, and we're going to get into those now. This is probably the hardest part about this section of our notes on ecology, just figuring out limiting factors and which one is which. That's why today's homework is actually on that. So the first type is called density independent. If I'm an independent person, it means it doesn't matter what anyone else is doing. I can take care of myself. So for this one, the actual population and its size, it doesn't matter. It can be small, it can be large. Sorry about the dog squeaky toy. You should have to ignore that. The population size is not going to matter. This factor is going to affect the population no matter what. So this would be something like a fire or some type of major climate issue. I like to use the 2 versus 100 idea. So if you have two different forests that are the exact same otherwise, except for being in two different places, and you have 2 deer in this forest and you have a bunch of deer over here. If a forest fire comes in and wipes out both forests, were the 2 deer affected the same as the 100 deer? Yes, it does not matter how large their population is. It's regardless of the population size. Thank you, Sam. All right, so 2 versus 100, it doesn't matter. If there's no more shelter because the forest is destroyed, there's no more shelter for anybody. The 2 can't live and the 100 can't live. Now, on the other side of that, we have a factor called density dependent. These definitely depend on the population size. So these will be things where if you're small enough, you might get away with it. So things like food shortages. Let's go back to our analogy. 2 deer in this woods, 100 in this woods. If we lose half of our forest, is that going to affect the 100 deer as far as food shortage? Absolutely. If we only have 2 deer in this forest and we lose half the forest, is that really going to affect them? Will they still be able to find enough food? Probably. Okay, it's probably going to be okay. Now you look at disease and you say, how the heck does this one work? Well, let's go back to our analogy. If 1 deer is sick, 1 deer has the disease, what are the chances in the forest with 100 deer that more deer will get sick? Well, you've got to think how much contact you're going to have if there's 100 deer running around. That 1 deer could run into any of those other 99. So yes, it's going to affect these guys. Now, if 1 deer is sick, what are the chances that he's going to run into this other deer inside this population? We got this whole forest. The chances of them running into each other are very, very slim. Okay, unless they're mating, which they could be. I probably could have used more than 2. But it's a lot less chance of interaction between these 2 than there are for the 100. All right, so let's see how you do. We're going to take a little quiz. We're going to do it Dora style, so please make sure you answer. You can answer out loud, and then I'll click the button, and you'll see if you got it right or not. But please definitely go through these, because you're going to be doing this by yourself in just a minute. Oh, or it could all pop up at once. You've got, let's go back. So predation. This is kind of similar to the disease problem. If we've got 2 and we've got 100, what is the chance that 1 wolf is going to eat dinner in this forest? Pretty good. He's got 100 to choose from. Now, if he comes into this forest, is it very likely that he finds dinner? Probably not. So that would definitely be a density dependent question. Now, if there's a volcanic eruption, I'm going to let you work through this one in your head. Volcanic eruption. Think about the 2 versus the 100. All right, hopefully you said density independent. It's not going to matter whether there's 2 or whether there's 100. An eruption is going to wipe out the whole forest and everybody's done. Now, chemical pesticides. Think of how we use chemical pesticides, okay? We don't just spray one plant. We probably spray the entire group of plants. So is it going to matter how small our population is? No, it's not. Density independent, because pesticides are going to get on everything. It's not going to matter if there's just a small clump or a big, huge field. Everybody's getting the same stuff. Now, parasitism. What do you think? Hopefully you said density dependent. Very good. This is similar to disease. If you've got somebody with parasites, you've got to run into somebody else before you can pass them on. Now, forest fire. We did this one. Hopefully you remember. Hopefully you said density independent. Very good. Density independent. It's not going to matter whether there's 2 or whether there's 100. The forest is wiped out. Now, migration. This is tough. Migration. People moving in or people moving out? Is that going to matter? Okay, hopefully you said density dependent. Is it going to matter if there's 2 in the forest, whether we add 2 more? Probably not as much as if there's already 100 in the forest and we add 2 more on top of that. Okay, the 100 are already probably going to be close to maxed out on their resources. If we add 2 more mouths to feed, we're going to have some issues. So it definitely depends on how many are already present. So hopefully you got most of those right. You're going to practice this a little bit more in your homework today. And when I say homework, I mean classwork that could turn into homework if you don't get it done. All right, so skip up under where we did life expectancy, and let's finish these out. So now we're going to move up one more level to communities. Somebody define for me what a community is. Dora moment. All right, hopefully you said something about more than one population coming together. I think in our notes we drew a man stick figure, a woman stick figure, and maybe a ladybug or a turtle or something like that. I think somebody drew a cat yesterday, so you should have drawn some other type of species present. So think back on population size. What types of limiting factors are also going to affect our communities? Okay, most of the same ones. Most of the same ones are going to affect us. Now, we know that communities are made of several different populations together, so we're going to have multiple different species together. Now, let's think of something real quick. If you never mowed your yard again, now I don't know what it's like to mow a yard because I had 2 older brothers, and so I never mowed the yard, and now I have a husband, so I'm never going to have to mow the yard. But if you stopped, just all of a sudden, the first thing you would see is that the grass got taller, right, and the weeds would grow, and sometimes you drive through your neighborhood and you've seen this happen. They haven't mowed it in a while. And later, you would start to see bushes grow up, and then maybe a tree would appear. And then once you started changing bushes and trees, you might start to see different animals start to come into the area because you've got a different habitat now for animals to live in. Now, after 30 years, you may end up having a forest in your front yard. But why does that happen? It's something called succession. Succession are those normal changes that are going to occur in a community of an ecosystem over time. So you're going to have different plant species come in, different animal species come in, but these are all natural changes that would take place regardless of all the forces that were acting on the area. There's 2 different types of succession. The first type is called primary succession. This is only going to occur in those areas where an ecosystem didn't already previously exist. So can you think of any place this would be? Hopefully you said Hawaii. Hawaii didn't always exist. It's a volcanic island. So it started as open volcanic lava that had hardened. The first few individuals that grow there are called pioneer species. Pioneer species, just like the pioneers that were first to inhabit the western part of our country, are those very, very first to colonize a piece of land. They're usually very small and very fast growing, lots of mosses. You can see lichens down here. Lichen is an algae and a fungus put together. So very, very small organisms, very fast growing and very fast reproducing. They're going to build kind of your bottom layer of your producers. This is just a picture showing you primary succession. So you start with bare rock, and then you get grasses and bushes and trees, and then larger trees, and even the final trees. Now the other type of succession is called secondary succession, and this is actually possible to take place right in front of your eyes. This is when you already have an existing community or ecosystem and it gets disrupted by something. The most common is forest fire. For us around here, tornadoes tend to do this around here, but you have this replacement of the species that used to be present, usually with some of the same species, and sometimes they change completely. Here's a really good drawing of this. You can see you have a regular forest that's nice and full and trees and all kinds of stuff here. Well, a forest fire comes through and wipes the whole thing out. Well, lots of the seeds get buried. Sometimes they get burned. Lots of our minerals that were hidden in these plants are now redeposited in the ground. And this is going to start to grow. It's going to grow from the seeds that were buried. It's going to grow from the interior of trees that maybe didn't get completely destroyed. And you eventually get a even more lush environment than you had before because of the minerals that did get released through the burning process. Sam's going nuts. All right, we're almost done. So a climax community is going to be that stable endpoint. Once you've gone through succession and you've reached the point of these hardwood trees, these conifer trees that are the last step in your succession process, then you know that you've reached the end, and you're not going to do much changing after that unless you have some type of disturbance that causes a secondary succession. Now, let's talk homework, all right? You're going to want to have your notes out just in case you took anything that's going to help you here. This is classwork. However, if you don't finish, it is homework. First and foremost, I would like you to work by yourself. That's the only way that I can tell that you understand it. I'm trying to pump up your grades, trying to get your grades looking good before we go into the very end of the semester, and you've only got like 2 weeks left. So on your worksheet, you'll see that the front side of your worksheet has a bit of reading to do, okay? So for the first about, I'm going to say this takes you about 7 or 8 minutes, at the very most probably 10 minutes. I want you all quiet because I want you reading all the way through. You're not going to be able to answer the rest of it if you don't read. I want you to read quietly to yourself first. That's why it's in bold there. Once you get this read, this is going to kind of jog your memory on what we just covered. It's going to give you lots of examples and things to choose from here. And then this is a little article on this actually happening and how limiting factors are going to apply to a specific population that we know of. Now, on the back, you've got questions to answer. So the first one is pretty easy. It asks you to explain something to them, explain the difference. The second one is going to ask you to identify and describe certain factors that you saw in your actual article here about the yellow perch. And then on the far side of your paper, these are all, thank you, Sam. These are all different examples of certain scenarios. Hush, Sam. Nothing we can do about that? No? Okay. Different scenarios that may take place. What is it? No? Okay. Different scenarios that take place in nature that you need to kind of classify. It says classify each one as density dependent or independent, and then give a reason for your choice. So if you don't do that second part, you're going to get half credit on all of this. So please, 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 writing in sentences. I had trouble with that on the test. Get all of this done today so you don't have any homework, and I can give you a nice fat grade on Thursday to pump up your score in my class. All right, please be nice to Mr. Hall. You can tweet me questions if you've got them. I'll have my phone on me, but this is pretty self-explanatory. So no homework tonight. Get it done in class, and I will see you tomorrow.